Macro 24. Today our segment will focus on the fiscal cliff, which describes a bundle of U.S. federal tax increases and spending cuts that will take effect at the end of 2012 and the beginning of 2013, with the goal of decreasing the federal deficit by $503 billion at the end of the 2013 fiscal year. The amount of deficit that could be decreased as compared to the U.S. projected debt incurrence without the fiscal cliff is illustrated by this graph, where the blue line represents the decrease of debt with the fiscal cliff and the red line represents the deficit increase without the fiscal cliff. If the fiscal cliff occurs, it is expected to cause a recession in 2013, which would decrease GDP by 1% and increase unemployment by 10%. And now here's Anna with the two possible solutions of the fiscal cliff.
Thank you, Jessica. And yes, there are two paths we can take regarding the fiscal cliff. The first option would be for us to increase taxes and decrease spending, which will cut deficit as a percentage of real GDP by half. But this, however, may lead to a decline in our overall economic growth. Specifically, GDP will decrease by 1%, and like Jessica said, our unemployment rates will increase by at least 10%, and this may even lead us to another recession. Our second option would be for us to cancel some, if not all, tax increases and spending cuts in order to keep our economy strong. But this may lead our country to debt as large as those in most European countries. Back to you, Jessica.
There are four components that contributed to the fiscal cliff. The first is tax cuts. Over the past 10 years, the Bush tax cuts have kept taxes in the U.S. rather low. These cuts are all going to expire at the end of 2012, causing increased government revenue from higher taxes. Spending cuts are also part of the fiscal cliff. To start paying off the deficit, the government must cut back on spending. The government plans on doing this by cutting defense spending, decreasing physicians' pay from Medicare, and reducing federal unemployment benefits. The lack of unity among government because of the Democratic and Republican splits has stalled government action to prevent the fiscal cliff. Finally, America's lack of long-term solution for paying off the debt has led to the culmination of the fiscal cliff. And now here's Ashley with further analysis on the fiscal cliff.
The word cliff implies an all-or-nothing situation. Once you jump off a cliff, there is no way you can go back. You only plummet towards the earth. Whichever path we choose, the outcome will be difficult to undo. Also, America has just recovered from a long, brutal recession. For this reason, we are close to the edge of the cliff, and even the slightest mistake will lead us back into a difficult economic crisis, causing us to fall off the cliff. However, this difficult situation will lead us to a better government unity among Democrats and Republicans.
Thank you, Ashley. The fiscal cliff has been building up for several years now, so here's a rough timeline of how it will break down. As you can see, this November, our lame duck Congress session began. This refers to the old Congress still being in power despite the recent elections in which we elected new officials. The lame duck Congress usually gets less done because many congressmen and women's seats are changing hands. On December 14th, this lame duck Congress will adjourn for the holidays, and then the new Congress will take over on January 3rd of 2013. Fiscal provisions will begin taking place on the 31st of December, and then more will happen the 1st and 2nd of the year. This is when we will go over the fiscal cliff, and our economy and our deficit will suffer. The Bush tax cuts will expire, raising taxes for everybody, and then spending cuts will also take effect within days of each other, which is a measure to control our nation's deficit.
And now I'm here with John Everyman in Lifetime Fitness LA. John Everyman, what do you think about the fiscal cliff, and what are your opinions?
Well, I'm not really a big fan of this whole fiscal cliff thing. You know, as a lower income American, I really need all the money I get every day. For example, I wouldn't be able to put food on the table or use my gym membership here if I didn't have enough money. Then I wouldn't be able to stimulate the economy, decrease the unemployment rate, and keep moving on the path towards a balanced budget.
Our recommendation on how to solve the fiscal cliff is to raise taxes on the wealthiest Americans making $250,000 and up per year. A tax raise on these people would move their current income taxes from 35% to 40.3%, a 5.3% rise. If you make between $100,000 and $250,000 per year, you will see a 2.3% rise in your income taxes. Americans making $50,000 to $100,000 per year will see a 1.1% rise in taxes, and anybody making less than $50,000 per year will only have to pay 0.7% more taxes. These people, who we are raising the taxes on the most, are not people who are currently living paycheck to paycheck and who are making much more money than the average American. We believe that the federal deficit is a much more severe problem than the economy, and it needs to be dealt with right away. Because as people wait for a solution, our economic spending will stay low because of insecurity about our country's future. The upper-class Americans who will see the biggest tax increases will lose some disposable income, which may dampen the economy's growth slightly. However, the small downturn will be minor compared to the complications of a growing debt that currently exceeds $16 trillion.
Thus, the fiscal cliff matches the economic picture at large. Yes, Americans are worried about the fiscal cliff, but they still think that there is hope on the horizon. That hope is invested in the belief that Democrats and Republicans will work together to lead America out of this economic mess of the past few years. That's all for today, folks, and we'll see you again tomorrow on Macroeconomics.